Hi there, my name is Sara Sheehan, and welcome to my podcast, Transformational Thinkers with Sara Sheehan. Today, I'm talking with my friend and admired mentor, Doug Brown, about his business, working with executives and business leaders on increasing their sales skills and improving their ability to close business. Doug helps salespeople and sales teams and can even provide sales talent to companies looking for commission-only sellers. If you would like to learn more after listening to today's discussion, check out the show notes for a link to book a meeting with me or Doug. Doug, you have an absolutely fascinating backstory, at least to me you do, because there are some common threads in your life that are still present in your business today. You grew up with an understanding of the value of hard work, having a fire deep inside to achieve more and do more and truly impact the outcome of your life. You've always pushed yourself to do and achieve more. You also served our country in the U.S. military. What branch of the military were you in?
I was in the United States Army.
Excellent. And so where did your service take you and what were your experiences there?
Well, it first took me to Oklahoma. That's where I went to basic training. Originally, I was going to go into the medical field, or I wanted to learn languages. And I scored extremely high on what they call the ASVAB test, which, I could pick anything I wanted. And so I picked a medical specialty. And then as I was just about to go to, get set up to go to basic training, one of the long-serving master sergeants that were there, he said, you should go into this combat arms field. You could go into the artillery. And he said, you qualify as a fire direction controller. And I'm like, what's that? And he said, well, you plot all this data and do all these mathematical computations to make sure that you coordinate all the, like air fire, land fire, all that cannon and missiles and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. He's like, you'll make rank way faster. And Sarah, there's a bonus. So, at 19 years old, when you hear, I think it was $5,000 bonus at that time. I was like, oh, okay, I'll do that. Right. And
Right.
So I did. So that's what took me to Oklahoma, because I was in Fort Sill. And eventually I came back to the medical field in the military, but that's how it took me there. It took me a lot through the United States. And then, I was part of the Gulf War era as well. And so, I spent 12 years and 7 days actually in the military.
That's a good amount of service. That is to be applauded, honestly.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I had a lot of fun and a lot of good times too, So, and I learned quite a bit. Some of the things I even carry through, with me today about the discipline side of it. And you learn a lot about people, because in the military, you meet all kinds of people from all different walks of life, from anybody from, super high education to people who didn't even finish school. And, because they had to either support their families, or they were in a place where, it was the military or prison, that type of thing as well. So it was a really great experience for me. I wasn't prepared for it originally, but it definitely worked out. And, it served me all the way through my life at this point.
Excellent. I love the point that you made on discipline, because we can't forget that creating and laying down those habits are things that will serve you the rest of your life, no doubt about it. And so I understand that music was a really important part of your life, growing up years all the way through to adulthood. And I'm aware that you sold music equipment to some of the world's leading bands. Tell me about that.
Well, music was always something that inspired me ever since I was just a young child. I remember. And my brothers used to listen to, they're a lot older than I am. I'm the youngest out of four. And my oldest brother's 9 years older. So, I mean, he was listening to Aerosmith while I was still listening to, I don't know, Mr. Rogers on television or whatever, right? So, but I always remember hearing the music, and in particular, complex musical arrangements were always really interesting to me as a child. And so I grew up in an environment in some capacity where good was never good enough. So it's like, if you were really good in music, you weren't good enough to make it in music, that type of thing. And so for a lot of years, I doubted myself, even though I played in a lot of bands. And then eventually, while I was going through college, I landed a job selling music equipment. And I then ended up working with, Aerosmith and the Eagles and Billy Joel and Paul McCartney and the Wings and, all of the Extreme, a lot of the big bands of that at Boston. I was very close with some of those guys from the band. A lot of those bands that people listen to, even today on the radio, I got a chance to work with. And what happened was Barry from Boston, Goodrow from Boston, one day said to me, "Man, you're really good as a musician. You should go to music school." And I was like, "Oh, well, thanks, Barry, So I decided, you know what, he's probably right. Let me give it a shot. So I said, well, I'll apply to some of the best schools out there. So the first one I applied to was Berklee College of Music in Boston. Did my audition. They took me right away. Ended up going there.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to, what I teach people a lot now is part of the winning process in selling is confidence. Confidence is sexy, so to speak, right? And I worked with so many famous musicians, and some of them, frankly, weren't even that great as a musician, but what they had was confidence when I look back on it, right? Mm-hmm. They were good, don't get me wrong, but they weren't, they weren't somebody you're going to see at the Met. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
So and I grew up, my grandmother was more of a classical pianist, so I grew up kind of in that environment as well. But what I realized was that most of them had the ability to say, you know what, I'm going to see this through and I'm confident I can do it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And they just stuck with it for a long time. And there's certainly like bands like Kansas, and I worked with the drummer for Lou Reed, and he was in this band called Stories a long time ago. They had a song called Louie, 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 and super nice guy, but just all very confident, right? They were confident people. So that's the thing I learned from that process. And I wanted to be a professional musician. But then what happened was these guys and gals were telling me about their tour schedule and being on a bus for 300 days in a row.
That's right.
I was like, you know what? I want a family and I want to be around for the kids and all of that stuff. So I decided not to do that. I became a professional DJ. I was one of the very strong, I would say, probably top 10 DJs in the Boston area, for a while. And then my kids started growing up and I was like, I don't want to be out all night, all day, because I was working 6 jobs a week, holding down a full-time position, on top of, because I was selling during that period of time as well. So
that's a ton. And so just a couple follow-up questions. What kind of equipment were you selling?
So I was selling everything, but keyboards were my primary. So anything from pianos to synthesizers to, you name it, anything that had a key. That I sold guitars, I sold bass guitars, I sold drums, woodwinds, brass instruments. I learned them all.
That's impressive.
Yeah. And what was really cool is I got a chance to start, practicing other instruments as well. So I learned how to play saxophone and flute, which were never going to be something that I'm terrible at as a flautist. But, I played guitar. And so it served me in the bands because I was a vocalist who played keyboards and that was good enough. But then I could play bass. I could play other instruments. So that allowed me, some other opportunities that I didn't have if I didn't play those.
Mm-hmm. The reason I wanted to ask about this time in your life is I really wanted to highlight the fact that you clearly demonstrated your desire to do and achieve more by the behaviors that you were even practicing then at selling. And I just wanted to make sure that I brought that up.
Yeah, and I think that's a really key component to being successful in anything is having the confidence level to say, I'm going to do this in spite of if I don't feel confident at it and staying with it. And some of the best advice one of my mentors told me was he said, it's always going to take you longer to get to where you want to most of the time. And it's usually going to cost you 2 to 3 times more than you figure.
Mm.
But you'll always get your goal if you just keep your nose pointed in the direction you want to go and keep walking. And, I think that's playing the long game, right? And so that I think is, especially in selling, too many people try to play the short game, but the long game gives you leverage in the
Mm-hmm.
process. And I think you get leverage because even in age, we get wisdom as we grow older. We go, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not going to do that again, or when some younger person is going to do something, it's like, hey, did you think about it this way? Because you know what's likely to happen. But that comes through repetition, practice, seeing it through. And, it's not always straight up. I learned that working with the bands. I mean, these bands that we know today, still, they're out there touring. I mean, Aerosmith's out there still touring, right? So,
Absolutely, yes. Paul McCartney's still making music.
yeah, and he
That's
probably will
amazing.
for forever,
Yes,
and they didn't always have times that were what other people would consider fun, nor did they, right? I mean, I remember even like older musicians like Sammy Davis Jr. when he was playing with the Rat Pack of Frank Sinatra and those guys. He was saying publicly that sometimes he went in and played in Vegas and the casinos didn't want to pay him, and things like that. So it's like it's a business, and that's what people forget about the music business, right? um, and
for sure.
so yeah, like anything, you got to see it through and have that desire to keep going in spite of. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger didn't become the greatest bodybuilder in the world by getting up every day and going, I don't think I'll go to the gym today, even when I don't want to. And he's admitted he had days like that, but he goes to the gym anyways.
That's the kind of habit that definitely changes the world.
Hmm.
A habit that you do and you continue to practice and hone. And so I wanted to ask if you would share with me and our listeners a little bit about the multiple degrees that you have achieved.
Educationally, you mean formal education?
Yes, and I mean, you have consistently shown that you go above and beyond in everything that you do. And so I understand that you have at least 3 degrees.
Yes. I actually have five. Five
Five
total.
degrees.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I do.
Tell me about your higher education
So,
achievements.
well, part of, so sometimes going above and beyond can be our greatest strength, sometimes can be our kryptonite, right? It could be our greatest weakness. And I got all these degrees because I really didn't, I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't have that confidence to go forth and say, this is what I want to do, because it was one of those things that when I grew up in that environment, it was like, no, you have to be, you have to have a job. You got to, selling, my gosh, that's a soft skill, it's like that type of thing. So, I mean, even universities looked at it that way. When I was looking for sales, universities for selling, they were like, no, we don't do that. That's not a real degree, right? So, I got degrees in, biology, nuclear medicine, business, finance, general studies, music, things like that. And, but I just didn't really know what I want. I couldn't put my finger on this is what I want to do, even though I knew internally that I would like to do this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my driver in life is to see other people's faces light up and have a good time and grow and give them and instill, the ability to do more than they think they could ever do. Right. Then that came up partially from my childhood of not having that and battling through and overcoming that myself. But it was always something like when I was a, younger person, I'm 61 now, right? So when I was a younger person, I could always remember me thinking like this. It's like, I'm almost like an empath in some way where somebody's, having a hard time. I want to help them out of that. Right. And so that's what I wanted to do. And I wanted to get paid for that. And I knew that. but I just didn't know how because I was in an educational system that frankly wasn't really allowing, or I couldn't see that ability to do so, because it's like, okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
if you go get a degree in finance, you got to work for a bank or you got to work for insurance, or whatever. If you get a degree in business, you want to go into business administration because you got to have your MBA, because if you don't have your MBA back then, that was nothing, all these rules, right? Which are quite
Mm-hmm.
frankly not true.
That's right. And so,
Right.
Doug, how did you come to understand that the sales world was where you needed to be? How did you figure that out?
So I have, sometimes necessity is the mother of all invention, as they say. So what happened was I got out of the military. I had a college education, some then, but I was like, you know what, I'm going to go get a real job. And I wasn't out of the military yet. And I'm like, I'm going to be a doctor. That's a real job, right? It's a respected
Mm-hmm.
job. So I
Mm-hmm.
applied to medical school. I got accepted. And while I was in medical school, the Gulf War came up. And so they were like, you have a critical skill. We need you for this. So guess what? You can't go to medical school right now.
Oh.
And in the meantime, I went through a divorce. So when I got when the Gulf thing ended, so did my marriage, basically, right? So it was like I lost all my money that I had saved to go to medical school, but I was determined. So I kept reapplying. I got reaccepted, and then I got accepted into the nuclear medicine program at the university I was in. I could start that before waiting for another year of college. So I was like, okay, I'll finish this because I can finish it in a year because I had so many credits. And I went through that and I got into the hospital setting. But now I'm $20,000 in debt from taking loans for college.
Mm.
And, this was way back, back, in the late 80s at that point. And so I was like, geez, I can't find a job in the hospital because what happened is the hospital industry kind of was dropping at that point. It was kind of healthcare was in a transition. I applied for 308 positions in nuclear medicine across the United States. I got 3 responses. I got a job in Kentucky. Now, I lived in Massachusetts at the time. I was getting ready to pack up to go to Kentucky because I got accepted in the job. And 10 days before I was to leave, they cut the budget for the hospital and they cut the nuclear medicine program out at the hospital.
That's horrific.
Yeah.
That is so, it's more than the wind out of your sails. That is devastating.
Yeah, because it wasn't the easiest degree to get, number one, and I had to pass all the tests to get there. And I agree with you, but it turned out to be a happy story because during that time it was like, well, what am I going to do? Right. So I started selling telecommunication services for a multi-level marketing company. And it was called Excel Telecommunications. They're like, I got to make some money because I got to at least pay my loans and live. Right. So I started doing that. And then I got offered a position to take emergency call for a hospital locally, which means basically you're up 24 hours a day. When they need you, you come in, they pay you. So I was doing that and I was like, geez, this is kind of weird because then when I was in the hospital setting, what I realized was I got in this to help people, but the hospital runs like a business. And so, if I could do 5 cases a day, they wanted me to do 7. If I did 7, they wanted me to do 9 and 11 and so on and so on. And I was like, that's not why I signed up for this. And when I was in the hospital, they started talking to me about a full-time position, but I was making less money in that full-time position than I was selling music equipment, having a really good time.
Mm. That's hard. That's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I said at that point is, you know what? I'm going to try to give this thing sales a real shot. And so I had a little bit of a telecommunications background. So I applied to telecommunications companies. And one of them, right out of the gate, hired me. And I was like, okay, cool. But they were selling something that I had never sold before. So I overnighted myself 3 telecommunications engineering books and I looked at them and I studied up on all this digital technology that at the time was cutting edge.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, well, long story short, in my first year, I was their number 1 rep in the company.
That's
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah. And eventually we had,
Really impressive.
yeah, it was great. I mean, we had 320 salespeople at the, toward there. I was the number one guy. I was outselling, sometimes teams of 9, by myself. I developed a lot of different ways to drive leads to incoming. The CEO of the company was regularly calling me going, "What are you doing? I love it. You want to come out to Los Angeles and teach our people out here or come, all over the country." And it was a great thing. And the thing is bam, started making a 6-figure income, right?
Nice.
And I was like, okay, well, why would I go?
It's transformative.
Yeah. And then it was a multi-6. And then, then I got offered a position within, and they offered me $450,000 a year for this position. And back then that was still, today it's reasonable money, but back then it was like a lot more money.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, geez, there's something here. And so then what happened was they wanted me to train their teams.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because I was doing something that was working. And then what happened was I helped a training company, and the training company asked me to train their people and introduced me to a man named Chet Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
Chet wrote a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine. And when I looked at Chet's stuff, I was like, wow, this is really good for business. So I started studying that. As I started studying that, I approached them and said, hey, would you give me a chance to be a coach for your company on growing revenues in companies and things like that? Chet said, yes. I came in there, and in the first 4 months, I became their top producing coach. And all I was doing was applying sales skills to the process.
Excellent. And so if you were to look back at your position that you were just describing, where you achieved remarkable results, are they the same skills that you were using in your role as a coach with Chet Holmes' organization? Are they the same skills?
They were. So the thing is see, I didn't know much about coaching. I knew some about coaching, but what I did understand was that you can't deliver coaching without having a client.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't have a client, what's the cause of the problem of not having a client? Well, we're not selling, right? So
Right.
what I did is applied sales methodology to the coaching business.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked at, all of the things that I teach today. How do you get new clients? How do you increase buying transactional value? How do you increase buying frequency, right? All of the processes. And I just applied it. And what was happening was I was dealing with business owners, especially, and they recognized, oh, okay, this guy can help me. At that time, the kid can help me get there. And so they were buying because they had, people buy for 2 reasons, really, when it comes down to it. 2 major reasons. Number 1, they have a problem they want to resolve.
Mm-hmm.
Or 2, they have some future opportunity that they want to get.
Mm-hmm.
And, so some type of providing a better future for themselves.
That's right.
So those are the 2 major arching categories I find that people want to make an investment. Nobody really likes to be sold to. They like to buy. So if we solve those 2 challenges for them one way or another, then, and if it makes sense, timing's right, all of the factors, we have a sale. It's, as long as we're playing win-win. So that's what I did. And I applied that. It worked out great. From there, a man named Tony Robbins came along, wanted to buy into the company. So eventually I became the president of training and sales for that company. And I took Tony's close rate from 17.8% to 43.2% across his presenters teams, and then his sales teams went up, and the coaching went up, and the consulting went up. And then people started taking notice, of me. I was starting to make a name in that industry. So other people hired me. I worked for Russ Whitney on Rich Dad Poor Dad and a bunch of other brands. We did work for Brian Tracy, Deepak Chopra, the E-Myth Company. The list just goes on, right? The Ask Method Company, all kinds of things.
It's impressive. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing transformation. And so let's switch gears and talk a little bit about how you're working with clients today and how you're serving them. And then maybe we can highlight a couple of cases that demonstrate results in your clients' lives.
So how I'm working with people today. So I still work with companies and individuals today. I train individuals who are good, who want to get better, really, when it comes down to in selling. So, I move them from the next level of where they are to the next level. I mean, it's that simple. It's been very gratifying to see people take the steps from point A to point B, and a lot of them take the step from point A to point M. Right? It's because we get them going, and then they're like, oh well, I can do better at this, or I can do better at that. And really, what we're doing is we're teaching them how to think, act like a 1% earner, using 1% strategies and infusing that in and mixing it in with the what I call the inner guidance system, the inner voice of selling, if you will. And because a lot of times, most times, business challenges are not a business challenge, Sarah. They're a personal challenge that manifests themselves as a business problem.
Or potentially mindset.
Yeah, a lot of people call it mindset. I'm not a big fan of that word because mindset kind of means it's stuck there. It's like set, right? And on any given day, we wake up with different moods. Most of us, or I'll speak for myself. So it's about taking where we are, and you brought up the word habits in the beginning, the rituals and the habits that we do. Those are great as long as they're serving. But if we're selling, for example, and we grew up, because a lot of these things stem from childhood, if we grew up in a negotiation family, right? And I've witnessed people do this. They're always negotiating. They were rewarded for negotiating. Well, they close the sale and then they renegotiate the sale and they lose the sale because they're renegotiating, right? So it's things like that. And they don't even know why they're doing it. So we work on those triggers that happen, as well as all of the strategies and tactical things. But what we're also doing is teaching them revenue growth strategies in the process. How to think like an owner, how to think like a business person, how to think like the other person that we're actually selling to, because we're not selling to titles, we're selling to people. And so what are the trigger levels for those people? So we're going pretty deep into that whole process with people. And it works great. I've had people go like, I had one guy go from 140,000 a year in commissions to 2.1 million in commissions in his first year. I've had
that's beyond transformative.
Yeah. And it's not just one person that I've had results like that. So usually people tell us, we're worth at least 5 times what we asked for, right? for the process. So that's always a good thing, because I always like to provide a minimum 5-to-1 return on the process.
Wow.
So, and then with companies, we're helping them with two facets. We're A, just growing the revenues and the profits in the company, and B, how do they work with their own sales teams or salespeople, and have them become what they want them to become anyways, which is far better producers. And then as a byproduct of that, we also build and manage sometimes commission sales teams for people and companies.
That is so impressive. I believe that the work that you do is needed by so many people that don't even recognize it.
Yeah, I would agree. I was having a conversation earlier with somebody actually who decided to buy something off me, which was great. And he was saying the same thing. He was like, I don't think people understand. They don't know what they don't know, so to speak. And that we all want to be able to sell better, but we don't want to be that personified, used car salesperson. His words, not mine. I think sometimes used car salespeople are really great people and they sell ethically. But he didn't want to be that slimy salesperson. And in a lot of the training he goes to, it's just kind of teaching them to come top down on people, like the old way of selling, like the old tin man selling strategies, right? Those don't work, almost don't work at all any longer. But they're still being taught out there. And really, selling is nothing more than one person, because sometimes we sell ourselves, or more than one person trying to resolve a challenge or have a better future, and having that conversation to figure out what is the best pathway to do that. And people have been doing this long before people are selling to one another, It's just, we didn't have maybe a formal thing or exchange for money, but we used to do bartering systems, or we would
For
do
sure.
something else, right? And it's, it's been around as long as human beings have been around.
Absolutely. And so let's switch gears again. And if you can, highlight a couple of your client case studies and what those clients achieved after working with you.
Yeah, well, I'll take Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes. Their company was great. What I did with them is, because I was the number one producer, they were asking me to help other people. So I had to kind of figure out and deconstruct what I was doing. So I started teaching that to their people. But one of the things I've learned early on was always look at the numbers. And a lot of people don't look at the numbers in their business because the numbers tell a story. So one of the ways I was able to get that close rate to change was to look at the numbers, because at the time they were putting out a one-size-fits-all product, which, and it never ceases to amaze me. I've worked with Intuit, Procter & Gamble. I've worked with Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Nationwide, big companies, and they miss it. They miss the one size all sometimes doesn't work, right? So
well,
they're
talk to me
Yeah.
a little bit about what the detail in the numbers revealed. Is it actual number of times?
Yeah. So for example, they were offering a training product. The training product was geared toward, I would say, upper small businesses to enterprise level clients. But when I looked at their lead base, 70% of the leads coming through were under $300,000 in revenue, which would be a small company.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a training mismatch. So from the message was bringing them in, but the actual deliverable was actually off. So there was a market to mismatch messaging. And so what I did is I looked at this and I segmented the audience. And so I broke down the audience in three components: people under 300,000, people 300,000 up to $1 million. Well, actually it was four: up to $1 million, $1 million to $5 million, and then $5 million and beyond. And I took the same product sets that they had and I just readjusted the messaging, but I adjusted it to the audience and what they needed at the level that they were coming in. So for example, anybody under $1 million, their full focus should be on just getting new clients and increasing transactional value and regeneration of clients, right? They should be going to get to $1 million just focused on selling. When we go from $1 million to let's say 5 million, we're still focused on that, but now we're focused on putting systems and processes and things into the business to make the business be able to scale. When you get beyond 5 million for most companies, and these are just general benchmarks, right? I mean, it depends on the industry and what they're selling. From there, now we're talking about scaling that business in a different way. So you might have, as a $1 million company, you might have one salesperson. As a $5 million company, you might have 3 or 4 salespeople.
Exactly.
Right. But now to get from 5 million to 50 million, you're going to scale that sales team.
For sure.
That's what I did, is I segmented the offerings, and then I trained the sales teams on how to sell to the right level and how to have the conversation with that person on that level. Because a person who's doing $300,000 a year in a business, let's say it's their first business, and a person who's doing, to the extreme, $300 million, that conversation with the owner is going to be very different.
Very different.
Right?
Agreed.
So I trained the teams on how to relate and communicate on that level, the sales teams, and I segmented the product mix. And so to give you an example, they had one on the under $300,000. They were converting at less than 1%. And I took what they had, as they call the sales mastery system. I revamped that, just added 6 weeks worth of group coaching. They were selling this originally for $800. It was $795. I brought the product up to $1,450, added some group coaching to it. Now, prior to me getting there, they were selling 8 of these a month on average. In our first month of segmenting that, They went from 8 and we got 108 sales our first month.
Wow.
Our second month, we went to 232. The third month, we went to 346, I believe the number was. Right. And
That is amazing.
yeah, so it's again, this is what I did internally by looking at the numbers. And then I went back to their sales teams and I looked at their numbers on their front end of the sales. And we were able to get the conversion to go strange, but the sales management was reporting skewed numbers, which is not unusual. But they were claiming they were closing at 19%. They were closing at 12.1%. We then were able to revamp it, do the same thing I did with the other teams. And we took that from 12.1% to 21%. And the thing is I had that position there for 5 years, and it never came down. The numbers never came down for the 5-year period I was there.
That is very impressive. And that is a wonderful illustration of the results of your work.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could be, something like that. It could be, with Intuit, they were losing $10 million on a division. We got them to go from a $10 million loss to a $7 million gain in 1 year, but it was all messaging. They were messaging out the wrong message. I had another company that I showed how to build an agent base, right? They were doing internal sales, but they wanted to expand and grow. They went from 3.5 million to 10 million. Took them 2 years to get there. And then they went to 11 million and they got an offer to buy out, which the owner told me was ridiculous money. So it was like a 5x multiple on revenue. It was really interesting. So, I've done that. And then, there's a lot of different small and medium-sized businesses that I could tell stories about. But the whole bottom line is when we look at the numbers, we're applying strategies of the 1%, companies who are doing those type of things, but taking them into small and medium-sized business, applying those into the sales teams themselves, training people on how to act and think that way. It does work. And it's been working for a long time for people.
Right. That is a remarkable thing. A lot of people, if they applied some of these practices, activities, and habits in their daily lives, they would see tremendous results, which is why I wanted to highlight you so much. I was wondering if we could switch gears and you could chat a little bit with me about your upcoming launch with the Bitmo.
Yeah, Vibitno has been a passion of mine for a long time. So Vibitno is a personalized, meaningful follow-up system. That's why it was started. Because you talked about habits and rituals, right? A lot of people do not follow up with people, and in a lot of ways, it's not their fault, especially in the business context. Because, when you start getting 100, 200, 300 people you're talking with on a regular basis, it's like, how do you follow up with all these people? How do you stay in touch? But the Vibitno is coming out in 2024, and Vibitno is solving that problem for people. So, and it came about through our own pain. Like when I was in the telecommunications world, a friend of mine who was a top producer at another company, we went to a Panera Bread one day, and we were, which is, for those people who don't know that's like a sandwich shop, bakery. It's kind of a chain. And we were sitting there and just, I'll say, commiserating or, bitching about our days, like, oh, we can't get this done. And I wish we had this. And I can't follow up with these people. I can't do this. And I have, I'm losing sales here. And it's, when you're hitting high numbers, you don't want to lose money. It's that simple, right? So we were hiring assistants to cover some of this stuff, but it still wasn't getting done. And we were like, man, if we just had a technology that would do this. And so we wrote down on the back of a napkin everything we wanted. And I was like, I'm going to build this. Well, technology wasn't there then to be able to do that, but it is now. And so I explained it.
And so is this a CRM system with automation?
I put a CRM into the system, but what it was really designed for, I don't know in your life, Sarah, but let's say, there are relationships that I have made over the years where it's like, I want to get in touch with them more often just to keep the relationship
Yeah.
alive. But it's like, I just get
Oh,
busy.
yeah.
I got a couple businesses I'm running. I've got client work I'm doing, and,
Absolutely.
family for me is primary. So my children, I'm always involved in their lives, probably more than that they even want me to be. But it's, I can't help it. I'm that type of dad. And, and then I have my personal friendships and all this stuff. And it's like literally sometimes it's hundreds or thousands of people over time. But I just couldn't stay in touch with these people. And so I was like, I've got to do something, but I don't want to just send like some scripted message to them. I want it to be meaningful, right? And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, personal.
Personal.
So what I wanted to do, if you don't mind me sharing this, like, you had a cat that just passed that you had for 16 years, and you have another one that's 7 years old, and you just found out it's a diabetic, and you're taking care of that, and so something as a simple bonding point on that. What if I could create
Mm-hmm.
something that would create automated relevancy that was meaningful to you? And let's say, like, after this call, I don't know, a month goes by and you get a message and it was like, hey, so just thinking about you, your husband, but I was also thinking about Joy, your cat. And I just want to know how's the cat doing with diabetes, right?
That's very sweet. I love
So
that.
that, yeah,
Heartfelt.
and it's meaningful, right? It's so,
Absolutely.
hey, if you ever want to catch up, just let me know. You were just being thought of. Something as simple as that. Now, a lot of people go, well, that's not very businessy. It's like, well, let me tell you something. I've followed up with people for 2 years and then got a little company called NASCAR as a client from it, right? So I would learn things about people. So what we did with Vibitno is we recreated all that, but the system will actually create everything for you, and it'll even, if you forget, it'll bring the content up and say, hey, do you want to send this? Or it will actually send the content for you based on relevancy.
Wow. And so is there some machine learning aspect or
Yeah, in the beginning, it was just
something in
templates,
there?
trying to figure out, templates. But now with AI and everything coming in the way it is, it's a lot easier to implement this process. And it was really designed not it was designed as a relationship building tool, not a real sales tool. But people kept saying, my gosh, you know what if I could do this on the front end? What if I could do this with my marketing on the front end? I sell high-end clients, for example, right?
Yeah.
And then I started talking to people who were selling high end and asking them, how many deals a year are you dropping? And so, then I started looking at it and they're like, well, probably six. And I'm like, well, if you think it's six, it's more. I already know that. So what's your average deal? Well, it's $30,000. So it's like, all right, so you're dropping
Perfect.
180K out of the sky every year. How many years are you doing that? Oh, 10. There's 1.8 million, right? I'm like, okay, well, would you pay $100 a month for service that would gain back the majority of those sales, right? Because we all know, and this was the epitome. I was actually someone asked me to come to a sales consultant training call where they're training sales
Mm-hmm.
consultants.
Perfect.
And we all know that lack of follow-up causes lost sales. I mean, that's pretty much right.
Absolutely.
So this lady literally said on this call, guys, I just dropped the sale. We were talking about this. I just dropped the sale. And it went to another representative. She was an independent marketer for another company. And she had talked to this company a year ago. And this company had just
Oh.
closed and she didn't follow up. And she told us, she said, I didn't follow up. And the other person just happened to follow up and they were ready then and they bought. And it was 500 units and it was $1,000 a unit and
Oh.
they bought it for 5 years. So it's
That was painful.
yeah, so $500,000 a year for 5 years, $2.5 million. Now the killer is her commission is 50% on this.
This is horrible.
Right? So she lost $1.25 million over 5 years, guaranteed contract. So you get what I'm saying, right? So really,
I do. I see that companies will pay for this tool. Having this platform in their lives can make selling easier and better.
And individuals will as well. And that's, like I talk to real estate agents. I'm like, how many homes are you dropping a year? Right. And they were like, well, I don't know, same numbers. And I'm like, okay, so your average commission at a $500,000 price point, 6%, $30,000, you're dropping 10 homes a year, it's 300 grand, right? You start doing the numbers, whether you're a manufacturer's representative or you're selling healthcare, you're a coach or a consultant or whatever. But the reality is, it's not just the drop sales, because it's how many referrals could we spawn out of good relationships that we're not doing today. So there's this whole thing about buying frequency, transactional value, and getting new clients that we're just dropping even post selling. And so it was, that's kind of where it's going. But yeah, I put a CRM into it just so if people wanted to use the CRM, but I want to be able to make it work with other programs and products like, Salesforce and Pipedrive or whatever people are using as well. And then what I did is I built in what I call a goal plan into this process where people can actually figure out if they want to make net commissions of X, they need to be able to sell a certain amount. But we figured in all the churn rates and all the drop sales and all of the expenses and everything. So they'll know exactly what they need to sell every year.
That is a genius thing to add that really demonstrates your sales leadership and your knowledge in leading a sales organization. I can't wait to see it.
Oh, thanks.
Truly, I can't wait to see it.
Well, if you want, you want to be a beta tester, let me know, because we're coming out with
I would be glad. I spent some time on your page today, and I'm on your list.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, excellent. And so in terms of our listeners, I want them to know the actual website URL is vibitno.com.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yeah, it's Vibitno. Yep, that's exactly how it's spelled. And it actually means, I took it from a Slavic language. It means you matter in Slavic language, or esteemed one, so.
Excellent. I love the name and I love what you're doing with this platform. And I believe it will only extend your impact even further and bring more people to you that can transform their lives and the lives of the people in theirs as well. And so with that, Doug, is there anything else that you would like to share today about what you're up to?
No, I think it's all good. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but I wrote an ebook just recently called The Nonstop 1% Earner. People want to get that, they can go to www.ceosalesstrategies.com/1 and then PE, percent earner, and just download the ebook.
Excellent. That is a wonderful promo for your ebook. I will make sure to go find that myself because I feel very strongly about the advice that you have and how you're guiding people. And I know that it can even impact me in a positive way.
Well, I appreciate that. And if anybody wants to learn, we've got a 1% university, a sales university that's out now. And, they want to come explore that, please do. They definitely won't be disappointed. I can tell you that.
Excellent. Do you have a mastermind that's forming anytime soon?
I don't have a mastermind. People have been asking me about forming a mastermind, so I might put something together on that. We train pretty heavily on the sales side. So, it's usually multiple times a week. So it kind of acts like a mastermind, but it's not really that type of mastermind. So I am considering putting one together. So thanks for bringing it up again. I just wrote it down.
Outstanding. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Doug. Is there any way that our listeners should reach out to you? What's the best way?
Yeah, they can. I mean, if they want to know more about me personally, LinkedIn is usually good. Doug Brown, DougBrown 123 is the LinkedIn. They can send an email to youmatter, YOUMATTER at ceosalesstrategies.com. My team will pick it up. If they want to get directly to me, they can send it to Doug at, ceosalesstrategies.com. We answer everybody's inquiries. So if for some reason you don't hear back, reach out at 603-595-0303 and let us know. But we are definitely very good at getting back to people.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Doug, and I'm so glad to be able to share your message.
Thank you. I'm very grateful you had me on, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to episode 10, CEO Sales Strategies with Doug C. Brown. I'm so thrilled to be able to share this conversation with you. The 3 big takeaways from today are: first, rethink pricing and value. Doug's strategy of increasing product prices while adding value through group coaching led to a remarkable surge in sales. This approach not only improved revenue, but also positioned products more attractively in the market. Second, the power of personalized follow-ups. The upcoming launch of Abitno showcases the importance of maintaining relationships in a bustling business environment. Utilizing CRM and AI technology, Doug stresses the significance of relationship building over transactional sales. Third, leverage 1% improvements. Now that's a winning strategy. Small, continuous enhancement in sales skills and team performance can lead to exponential growth over time. Doug's concept of 1% strategies can help clients not just compete, but dominate in their respective fields. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so you never miss an episode.